What would you do if, after a long day at work, the only thing you really wanted was a simple dinner delivered to your door, but what arrived was something you never imagined? This question echoed in my mind as I looked out the window, waiting for a delivery person who seemed to have gotten lost somewhere between my house and the restaurant. The city was enveloped in an unsettling silence, as if the streets of Brookhaven, New York, knew a secret that I had yet to discover. It was an ordinary night, or at least that's what I thought. I worked as a copywriter at an advertising agency, and my routine had become a sequence of monotonous days, each more bland than the last. My small apartment, which once was a cozy refuge, now felt like a prison. In hopes of finding some comfort, I decided to order something to eat. The delivery app was my last resort for happiness, a small indulgence amidst the chaos. But when the delivery person finally arrived, their vacant stare and the way they held the bag awakened something within me. What I didn't know was that this delivery would change everything. Upon opening the bag, I didn't find a simple meal, but something that sent a chill down my spine. Inside, there was a dish that appeared to have been prepared with a disturbing attention to detail. But there was something more. A crumpled piece of paper with a cryptic message that read, "Don't eat this if you value your life." At first, I thought it was a tasteless joke, a marketing stunt that had gone completely awry. But as the night wore on and darkness deepened, I began to feel a presence around me. The normal sounds of the city seemed to have vanished, and an oppressive silence took over the atmosphere. I looked out the window again and noticed the streetlights flickering, as if the city itself was breathing heavily. My heart began to race as I thought of all the stories I had heard about deliveries gone wrong. Urban legends about delivery people who never returned, unsolved mysteries involving people who simply disappeared in broad daylight. Fear began to seep into my mind, and I realized that somehow I was in the midst of one of those stories. I decided to investigate. I grabbed my phone and went to the restaurant's website. The page was down. Anxiety overwhelmed me as I realized there was no one to help me. What had happened to the delivery person? What was in that dish? I needed to know more. With the courage that only arises in desperate situations, I grabbed my coat and set out in search of answers. The streets of Brookhaven looked different at night. Shadows danced on the walls, and the wind whispered secrets I didn't want to hear. I headed toward the restaurant, a small diner that always had a smell of frying food in the air and a steady stream of customers. But when I arrived, I found the doors locked and the lights off. What happened to the place that had always been so welcoming? I looked around and noticed a small square nearby, where a few people were gathered. As I approached, I realized they were talking in hurried whispers. "Did you hear about the strange deliveries?" a woman asked. "They say some people haven't returned home." My stomach churned. The feeling that something was very wrong intensified with each passing moment. I needed to get home, but as I walked back, I realized I was not alone. The presence I had felt in my apartment was now with me, a shadow following every step I took. My heart raced as I tried to quicken my pace, but it was as if the darkness was holding me back. I arrived home breathless, and as I closed the door, I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. I looked at the bag still on the table. Curiosity and fear intertwined in my mind. What was inside the dish? What could happen if I ate it? The pressure in my chest grew, and I knew I had to uncover the truth. I grabbed the bag and, with a mix of terror and resolve, opened the container. What I found made me feel as if the ground was opening beneath my feet. The dish was empty, but the message had changed. It now read, "You shouldn't have come here." Panic took over me. I looked around, searching for any sign that I was dreaming, but reality was sharp and cruel. The story I was trying to unravel was unfolding right before me, and I was just a lost character in a horror plot. What had promised to be a simple meal had turned into a nightmare, and the truth I sought was closer than I imagined. Perhaps I was the next to disappear. The shadows danced around me once more, and the only thing I could do was close my eyes, hoping that when I opened them again, it would all be just a nightmare. But reality was clear. The horror was just beginning. The sensation that the darkness was alive enveloped me like a cloak. Fear pulsed through my veins, and the silence that had once seemed merely unsettling was now charged with a palpable tension. I was alone, but something inside me whispered that it was not true. The message on the dinner packaging replayed in my mind. You shouldn't have come here. And somehow, I knew there was something more, something I still couldn't understand. The shadows seemed to grow denser, and the streetlight flickered erratically, as if trying to warn me of something. My phone vibrated, and I nearly jumped. But when I looked at the screen, I saw it was just a notification from the delivery app. The message said the restaurant was temporarily down, and immediately, a chill ran down my spine. This was not a mere technical failure. Something much more sinister was at play. I decided I needed help, not just to understand what was happening, but to ensure my safety. I remembered a friend, Clara, who always had a way of dealing with the inexplicable. She was fascinated by mysteries and supernatural phenomena, and her curiosity made her an invaluable source of information. I picked up the phone and called her. The ring echoed more than usual, as if the silence around me was anxiously waiting for an answer. Hi, Clara. I need your help, I began, trying to control the tremor in my voice. Hi, what happened? She asked, concern evident. I quickly explained about the dinner and the message I had received. Clara listened attentively, and when I finished, there was a moment of silence. This is very strange, but there are various legends about deliveries that go beyond the ordinary. Some people talk about an entity that preys on lonely individuals, offering meals that, instead of satisfying hunger, attract something much darker. My eyes widened. Are you saying this could be real? I'm not saying it is, but you need to be careful. I can come over, but you must stay alert. Don't open the door for strangers, and don't eat anything you don't recognize. Promise me that. I promised and hung up. Clara always had a way of turning the inexplicable into something rational. But now, as I looked out the window, I felt the line between logic and the supernatural was dissolving. I decided I needed to investigate further. I went to the bag and examined the container of the meal. It was empty, but the message that had changed was etched in my mind. What else could be there that I had yet to notice? The room was cold, and I felt as if a presence was approaching. I glanced at the clock and realized it was already late. What I really needed was answers. I began searching for information about the restaurant and strange deliveries online. With each click, my heart raced faster. There were reports of disappearances, people who had ordered food and were never seen again. Accounts intertwined with urban legends about an entity that fed on loneliness and despair. I turned back to the window and noticed something that made my stomach twist. Across the street, a dark figure was watching. The face was hidden in shadow, but the presence was undeniable. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and I stepped away from the window, trying to calm myself. It was just my imagination, I thought. But then, a noise in the hallway made my heart stop. It sounded like heavy footsteps, and my apartment door was locked. The tension was unbearable. What was I facing? Something inside me knew it was more than a mere coincidence. This delivery, this message, everything seemed part of something greater. I needed answers. The phone vibrated again, and it was a message from Clara. I'm on my way. Stay safe. I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. While I waited, I decided to take a closer look at the bag. If there was something I hadn't noticed, maybe it was hidden somewhere. I searched every corner, but the only item that stood out was a small envelope that seemed to have been forgotten. With trembling hands, I opened it and found a yellowed piece of paper covered in strange handwriting. If you are reading this, It is too late. What has been served to you is not just food. You have become part of a game you cannot win. The city is alive, and with each delivery, it feeds on your fear. Run while you still can. My heart raced. What did this mean? The game? What had I done to get involved in this? In that moment, I realized that the darkness outside my window was not just a shadow. It was a presence growing stronger by the second, and I was at the center of it all. Fear wrapped around me like a prison, and I realized there was no way to escape. Then, a noise at the door made me jump. It was Clara, and I rushed to open it. She looked worried but determined. "What did you find out?" she asked, quickly stepping inside. "Read this." I handed her the paper, and as she read, I could feel the tension rising between us. Clara looked at me with a serious expression. "We need to get out of here now." But before we could move, the light in the room flickered and went out, plunging us into total darkness. Panic took hold of me, and I screamed. But Clara's voice was firm. "Stay calm. Just follow my voice." The darkness felt alive, and I could sense something moving around us. The fear was palpable, and the only thing I could do was cling to Clara's voice, which guided me through the chaos. Each step we took seemed to pull us further away from safety, and the feeling that we were being watched was undeniable. "Quick, through the back door," Clara ordered, and I followed her, my heart pounding irregularly. What awaited us outside? The answer was closer than I imagined, but at that moment, there was no turning back. The darkness surrounded us, and I knew that the true horror was just beginning. The darkness around us seemed to come alive, a pulsating entity that fed on our fear. Clara and I ran toward the back door, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. The silence was deafening, and the air was thick with an almost electric tension. I could feel my heart pounding so hard that I thought it might explode at any moment. As soon as we opened the door, a gust of cold wind hit us, as if something was trying to pull us back inside. Fear paralyzed me for a moment, but Clara's voice brought me back to reality. "Let's go. We can't stay here." She pulled my arm, and we moved forward. But what we found outside was even more terrifying than the darkness of the apartment. The street, which had once seemed like a familiar neighborhood, was now shrouded in a dense, almost oppressive fog. The streetlights flickered erratically, as if the city was struggling against something. I looked at Clara and saw the same panic reflected in her eyes. "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice trembling. The truth was that there was no one else around. What should have been a safe environment now felt like a labyrinth of shadows. "We need to get away from here," Clara replied, but her voice had a tone of desperation that did not go unnoticed by me. What had settled between us and safety? I didn't know, but as we ran, the feeling that something was lurking increased. I looked back and saw a shadow moving quickly, as if it were following us. Fear consumed me and I quickened my pace. "Clara, there's something back there," I shouted, and her determined expression turned to terror. "Come on, follow me." She pulled me into a nearby alley, where the light was even scarcer. The sound of our footsteps echoed, and with each passing second, I felt that the darkness was closing in, as if it were trying to swallow us. In the alley, a wall of graffiti and trash loomed. Clara stopped and began to search for something, and I followed her, panting. "Maybe there's an exit here," she murmured, but her words were laden with uncertainty. I too began to feel that hope was fading, and the reality we were trapped in made no sense. The city seemed alive, and not in a friendly way. Suddenly, I saw something glimmer on the ground, and I crouched to pick up a small object. It was a necklace with a pendant I recognized from somewhere. It was the same one mentioned by one of the missing victims in one of the reports I had read. Her name came to mind like a whisper. "Sophia." "Clara, look at this," I said, holding up the necklace. but her expression was one of horror. That was Sophia's necklace. She disappeared months ago. What is it doing here? The reality of what we were facing began to solidify. It wasn't just a delivery that had gone wrong. It was a pattern, a connection between the victims, and now I was being pulled into it. Adrenaline began to mix with a sense of helplessness. What could I do to escape this fate? As I thought, the alley began to tremble. It was as if the city itself was reacting to our presence. Clara held my arm, and I could feel her whole body tense. "We need to get out now," she shouted, and I needed no further encouragement. The feeling of being watched intensified, and the darkness seemed to want to envelop us. We ran for the alley's exit, but what we found was not relief. A hooded figure stood at the entrance, blocking our path. The face was hidden in the shadows, but what disturbed me most was the presence. Something that seemed to feed on our fear. "You shouldn't be here," the voice whispered, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "We're just passing through. Let us go," Clara pleaded, but the figure did not move. Instead, the air around us began to fill with a heavy energy. Her body shook beside me, and the idea that we might not escape solidified in my mind. Panic took hold of me, and I knew that it wasn't just a simple delivery at stake. It was something much deeper and darker. The figure raised a hand, and a wave of energy pulsed toward us. I didn't know what it was, but it was as if the city was manifesting in the form of a nightmare. The alley began to distort, and the walls seemed to close in around us. "Run," I shouted, pulling Clara to the opposite side. But the darkness surrounded us, and every step we took seemed to lead us deeper into the trap. The run turned into a frenzy. Fear was palpable, and with each passing moment, the city pulsed with a monstrous force, as if it were trying to capture us. I wondered if we could escape this web of horror unfolding around us. The thought that the delivery and the message were just the beginning of something much deeper and more malignant began to fixate in my mind. What was really at stake? We were facing something beyond the natural, and the truth lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. We ran, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to escape my chest. The hooded figure at the entrance of the alley seemed to be feeding off our fear, and with every step we took toward the darkness, the feeling of panic intensified. The alley began to twist around us, and I knew we couldn't stop. Clara pulled me along, and I followed her, not knowing where we were going, but certain that anywhere would be better than staying there. As we ran, the thick fog seemed to have a life of its own, wrapping around us like snakes. The air was heavy, and the feeling that something was watching us never ceased to haunt me. I was about to lose hope when suddenly, a scream cut through the silence. It was a sharp, painful scream that echoed off the walls of the alley. It seemed to come from all sides at once, and I felt as if I were being pulled into a nightmare. "It has to be a trap," Clara whispered, breathless. "We need to find a way out." "But where do we go?" I asked, my voice trembling. At that moment, a light flickered in front of us. It was a faint light, almost like a distant glow. But what caught my attention most was what was around it. It looked like a circle of protection, a symbol I recognized in some way. An ancient legend I had read in an urban legends book about a lost city and a cult that fed on the fear and pain of people. "Clara, look," I pointed, and she followed my gaze. This is what I thought was just a legend," she murmured, her eyes wide. The hooded figure began to move toward us, its cloak floating as if under the influence of an invisible current of air. The light in front of us pulsed, and the presence of the entity following us seemed to hesitate. On impulse, I pulled Clara toward the light. "If this is a legend, maybe we can use it to our advantage," I said with a determination I barely felt. As we got closer to the circle, the light intensified, and I felt a wave of warmth and safety envelop me. It was as if the city was divided. On one side, darkness and fear. On the other, this light that promised protection. But before I could think of anything, the hooded figure stopped at the entrance of the circle, its presence now seeming more threatening than ever. "You cannot escape what you are," the voice whispered, laden with indescribable anger. "You are part of the story, and the story cannot be changed." "We don't know what you're talking about," I shouted, but inside, a doubt was growing. What if there was some truth in that whisper? What was I really? What were we? The figure raised its hand again, and the energy around us began to distort. The circle of light started to falter, and I realized the protection was fading. Clara was gripping my hand, and I could feel her fear, but at the same time, a growing determination within me. "We can't let this consume us," I said, pulling her closer to the light. Then, in a desperate movement, I remembered the necklace I had found. "Sophia," I whispered, as if the name were a key. The necklace, the symbol of pain and loss, could be the connection we needed. I raised it above my head, and the light seemed to recognize the offering. An explosion of energy erupted from the necklace, and the light expanded into a blinding glow, pushing the darkness away. The hooded figure screamed, a sound that cut through the air like a blade. "You don't know what you're doing," but its voice began to fade, absorbed by the light that now surrounded us. As the light grew, I realized that the darkness was not just an external threat, but a part of something much larger. The city, the cult, the legends, everything was part of a cycle I barely understood. And in that moment, I realized I was in the hands of something bigger than I had imagined. What I thought was a simple act of surrender now revealed itself as part of a much more sinister plot. "Clara, we have to understand what this means," I shouted as the light enveloped us. And it was at that moment that the walls of the alley began to crumble, revealing a world beyond what we knew. A desolate space where time and reality seemed to distort. "What is happening?" Clara asked, her eyes filled with confusion. "I don't know, but we have to face this together," I replied as the light carried us out of the alley, toward an unknown destination. With one last glance back, I saw the hooded figure fade away, but its words echoed in my mind. "The story cannot be changed." And then I realized we were at the center of something much greater than any of us could imagine, and the true struggle was just beginning. The light seemed to fade the darkness, but as we moved forward, my heart pulsed with a mix of hope and terror. The alley transformed into a surreal scene, where the walls dissolved as if made of smoke, revealing an open space, a kind of limbo between worlds. Clara and I were together, but the feeling that we were lost in a nightmare only grew stronger. "Where are we going?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know. Just trust me," I replied, trying to convince myself that I had some control over the situation. But the truth was that I was as lost as she was, struggling against a whirlwind of emotions. What was that light? What did the necklace really mean? And, most importantly, who was that hooded figure? The light pulsed around us, and for a moment, I felt that we might find a way out, a means to escape this labyrinth of horrors. But soon I realized that the journey was just beginning. The space around us began to mold, and what was once a dark alley was now transforming into a distorted landscape, where shadows danced and whispered secrets that I could not understand. "Look!" Clara pointed to a figure in the distance, a specter shrouded in mist, who seemed to be watching us with disturbing interest. "What is that?" "I don't know, but we can't get closer," I shouted, every fiber of my being alerting me to the danger. The figure seemed connected to the energy that surrounded us, as if it were a guardian of some dark secret. But curiosity consumed me. The legend I knew spoke of trapped spirits, of souls that could not find peace. What if this was one of them? What if we could help her? Somehow, a part of me believed that finding the truth about the city and its mysteries could be the key to escaping. while another part feared that delving into this enigma would put us at even greater risk. "We need to investigate," I said, hesitating but moving toward the figure. Clara followed me, but I could feel her resistance. "We can't. What if it's a trap?" she insisted, but her voice seemed distant, as if she were losing herself amid the echo of the shadows. The figure began to take form more clearly as we approached. It was a woman, with sad eyes and a look of despair. A shiver ran down my spine. "You came to free her, didn't you?" The voice was soft, but laden with pain. "Free? Sure? How?" I asked, each word coming out with difficulty. "Who are you?" "I am one of many who have been lost here. The cult feeds on our fear, and until someone finds the courage to confront them, we will remain trapped in this cycle," she explained, gesturing to the space around us. "But to free her, you must sacrifice something you love." Her words echoed like a dark refrain in my mind. What did I truly love? The idea of sacrificing something so precious made me hesitate. Clara was by my side, and the sight of her terrified expression made me feel the urgency of the situation. "No, we can't do that," Clara shouted, taking a step back. "That can't be the only way." But the woman seemed firm. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it. What are you willing to sacrifice? What do you fear losing the most?" Her words pierced my heart. I knew the choice wasn't easy, but what did I have to lose? Clara? My life? What really mattered? What, after all, would set me free? "No, we're not doing this," Clara insisted, and I could see the internal struggle in her gaze. The figure moved closer, her deep eyes seeming to see through me. "You can choose not to sacrifice, but know that this will have consequences. The darkness feeds on fear and doubt, and as long as you hesitate, the city will continue to demand a price." The tension grew, and I felt that time was running out. Clara was by my side, but the emotional distance between us seemed to widen as the pressure intensified. What would I do? Would I sacrifice Clara's friendship for an uncertain future? Or would I remain paralyzed, allowing the darkness to consume us? "We need a solution that doesn't involve sacrifices," I shouted, frustration rising. "There has to be another way." The figure hesitated, and a shadow of doubt crossed her face. "Sometimes the sacrifice isn't physical but emotional. What do you fear more, losing someone or losing yourself?" Her words cut like a blade. I was caught between the desire to save Clara and the need to face my own truth. A wave of emotions washed over me, and I realized that the fight was not just against the darkness around us, but against the shadows within me. The doubt, the fear of failure, the belief that I wasn't strong enough. I don't know what to choose," I whispered, my voice faltering. But as I spoke, an idea began to form in my mind. What if, instead of sacrificing, we could transform fear into something that empowered us? "Clara, what if we used our fear? Instead of letting it control us, we can face it together. What do you think?" I said, feeling a wave of hope. The figure hesitated, and I realized that perhaps this was the key. It wasn't about sacrificing, but about uniting our strengths, facing our fears, and breaking the cycle. "Let's do this together. We are not just victims. We are stronger than we think." Clara looked at me, and I saw a glimmer of determination in her eyes. "Yes, let's do it," she declared, and for the first time, I felt that we could have control over what was happening. As we united, the light began to shine again, more intensely than before. The figure watched, and her expression changed, as if it were a reflection of our own transformation. "So face the darkness. But remember, the path ahead will be dangerous, and the true struggle is just beginning." And with that, the figure dissolved into a whirlwind of shadows as the light enveloped us. leading us to a new destination, where challenges and the truth awaited us. The air around us became denser, pulsing with an energy that seemed to want to engulf us. Clara and I were united in the decision to face the darkness, but the tension in my chest increased with every second. The spirit had disappeared, but its presence still lingered over us, like a shadow that refused to dissipate. I knew there was something deeper at play, something we couldn't simply ignore. Being together is the only thing we can do, I murmured to Clara, trying to convince myself that our union was enough. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. What if the force that united us was insufficient? What if, instead of protecting us, this courage led us to an even more terrible fate? The environment began to change again. The colors intensified, as if we were being pulled into a surreal painting. The smoky walls turned into a sea of distorted faces, expressions of pain and despair that seemed to scream for help. I felt watched, not just by the specter that had spoken to us, but by those trapped souls, waiting for someone to free them. "I can't stand this," Clara said, her voice trembling. Her anxiety echoed within me. What more do they want from us? Perhaps this is the trial we need to face, I replied, but the certainty in my voice was fading. The idea that we were just another piece in the game of something much larger left me agonized. My own fears were manifesting in grotesque forms, and I struggled not to succumb to terror. "We need to find a way out," Clara insisted, but the confidence in her tone was fading along with the light around us. "We can't stay here." "I know, but what if the exit is connected to this?" I pointed to the faces contorting on the walls, a crowd of lost souls begging for freedom. "If these souls are here, maybe we can learn from them. We need to understand what happened." "No, that's risky. What if it leads us down a path of no return?" Clara was pale, and I could see the internal conflict in her eyes. She wanted to believe we could get out of this, but fear paralyzed her. "But what if this is the only way for us to free ourselves? We can't let fear control us," I said, feeling the urgency growing within me. The external pressure was intensifying, and the space around us seemed to close in, as if the city was reacting to our hesitation. "Look," Clara pointed to a familiar face among the distorted faces. It was my mother's, her gaze lost in an expression of sadness. A pang of pain shot through my heart. "She's here?" Panic engulfed me. "Mother," I screamed, but her image dissolved, as if I were trying to grasp smoke. No, this can't be real. It's an illusion, a form of manipulation," Clara said, her voice trembling. "They're trying to attack you emotionally. But what if it's true?" I was drowning in a sea of contradictory feelings. The fear of not being enough, the guilt for not having helped more, and the anger at this situation. I was surrounded by ghosts of the past, and the external battle was turning into an even fiercer internal struggle. As if sensing the energy of my despair, the shadows began to stir. The faces on the walls became clearer, and the whispers turned into screams. "Release us, release us," echoed in my mind, a deafening chorus pressing on my sanity. "We need to get out of here," Clara shouted, but her voice was growing more distant, as if she were getting lost in the confusion. The terror was becoming unbearable, and I felt the pressure increasing, threatening to crush any remnants of hope that were left. "Calm down, Clara. We'll find a way out. We can't separate." I tried to hold her hand, but darkness was seeping into our thoughts, creating fissures in our connection. "I don't know if I can do it," she replied, her voice turning into a lament. "What are we going to do? We're cornered." The space around us began to tremble, and the shadows became more aggressive, as if they sensed our hesitation. The pressure mounted, and the pain of the trapped souls became almost palpable. I needed to act, needed to find an answer, but fear paralyzed me. Maybe we should confront this once and for all. I suggested, the idea sprouting in my mind. If we face our fears, we can break this cycle. And if it destroys us? Clara hesitated, but in her eyes, I saw a glimmer of determination. What if we confront something we can't bear? Then we'll do it together. As long as we're united, nothing can separate us, I said, trying to infuse courage in both of us. We need to find the truth, even if it's painful. It's the only way to free these souls and ourselves. The darkness around us began to stir even more, and I felt the pressure intensifying. A deafening scream echoed, and a wave of energy enveloped us, as if we were being pulled into the center of a hurricane. The labyrinth of shadows became chaos, and the lost souls crowded around us, their distorted faces reflecting our own despair. "Let's go, Clara, together," I shouted, holding her hand tightly. And, with one last breath of courage, I decided to confront the darkness, not just in search of freedom, but for the possibility of finding the truth that could free us once and for all. The light emanating from us began to shine more brightly, and as the darkness approached, I prepared to face whatever was to come. The space around us dissolved into a vortex of light and shadows, as if we were at the center of a storm. The souls trapped in their expressions of despair became a deafening roar, crying out for release. The air was heavy with the weight of the past, and I felt every breath become a struggle. Clara was by my side, her hand tightly clasped in mine, and the warmth of her presence was the only encouragement that kept me standing. "The truth," I whispered, as if the words could cut through the darkness surrounding us. "We need to uncover the truth." But as I spoke, the darkness began to take shape, forming an imposing figure before us. A spirit, more menacing than any we had encountered, emerged from the abyss. Its eyes glowed like extinguished lanterns, reflecting our pain and our weakness. "You shouldn't have come here," the spirit's voice echoed, deep and resonant, like distant thunder. "This place is home to the forgotten. What you seek cannot be found. We're not afraid of you," I shouted, trying to project confidence. But the truth was that my heart was racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins like poison. "We came in search of answers. We want to free the souls you keep captive." The figure laughed, a dark laughter that seemed to penetrate my mind. "Freedom? You don't understand. I am the guardian of what has been lost. Freeing these souls will mean your own destruction." I felt fear gripping me, a cold tentacle threatening to drag me down. But, looking at Clara, I found a flame of determination reflected in her eyes. "We can't let fear paralyze us," she said, her voice steady. "If we are united, we are stronger than any dark force." I took a deep breath, seeking courage. "If you are the guardian, then show us what you guard. Let's face this head on." The anger and pain I felt began to transform into a wave of energy, a push that made me move forward. I felt as if I were taking a step toward the abyss, but Clara's presence held me up. The darkness began to stir, and the spirit advanced, its claws extending toward us. "If it's the truth you desire, then prepare for the pain it will bring." The shadows turned into tentacles, ensnaring our bodies, pulling us into the darkness. "No," I screamed, struggling against the chains trying to bind me. "We are together. We will not succumb." Clara and I focused, uniting our energies, and the light emanating from us began to shine more brightly, dissipating the shadows around us. "Reveal yourself," I demanded, my voice echoing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. The spirit hesitated, the light pushing it back. The trapped souls began to stir, and the distorted faces started to become clearer, their expressions of despair transforming into a yearning for freedom. "You don't know what you're doing," the spirit shouted, the fury in its voice reverberating against the walls of darkness. But the light was growing, more intense, and I knew it was now or never. If you want the truth, then come, I challenged, feeling the energy pulsing inside me. Free these souls or face our strength. The storm around us erupted into a deafening clamor, and the spirit lunged for one last attack. The shadows became a shroud of oppressive darkness, and I felt the pressure in my chest increase. But instead of retreating, I pressed forward, holding Clara's hand tight. Together, I shouted, and the light emanating from us intensified, a beacon against the darkness. The battle became a dance of light and shadows, each of our movements a challenge to the spirit's dominion. I could feel the pain of the souls around us, and as we fought, the shadows began to fade, revealing the faces that had once been lost. Freedom, freedom, they cried, their voices joining in a powerful chorus. The light that emanated from us began to expand, and in a moment of pure intensity, the darkness shattered in an explosion of energy. The spirit screamed, its distorted face twisting in agony. "You cannot." And then, in a blinding flash, everything dissolved. When the light finally dissipated, I found myself in an empty space, Clara by my side. The spirit had vanished, and the faces of the souls were finally at peace. Their expressions relaxed. The air became light, and I felt a wave of relief. We had faced the terror, and together we had broken the cycle. But then, a strange feeling washed over me. Clara. And the souls? Are we really free? I asked, doubt beginning to seep into my mind. She smiled, though a mix of sadness and hope shone in her eyes. I think the truth is a journey, not a destination. What we have to do now is remember, and that is what keeps us united. As I looked around, I realized that although the darkness had been dispelled, the struggle was not over. Whatever we faced in the future, we knew we were stronger together, and the truth, as painful as it might be, would set us free once more. The light finally faded, and I found myself in a space that felt both familiar and alien. Clara was still by my side, but there was a distance between us, as if the experience we had shared separated us instead of bringing us together. The weight of what we had just faced still hung in the air, and the scars of battle were not just physical. They ran deep, rooted in our hearts. I looked at my hands, which were trembling slightly. The marks of the shadows remained, not as visible wounds, but as impressions on my soul. I felt the presence of the spirit, its essence still echoing within me, a constant reminder of the battle we fought. The souls we freed were now just shadows in my memory, fleeting glimpses of faces I would never forget. Each of them represented an interrupted story, and as much as I wished to believe that everything was resolved, the truth was more complex. Clara took a deep breath, breaking the silence that enveloped us. "Are you okay?" Her voice, usually strong and confident, carried a tremor that did not go unnoticed. I knew she was also struggling with the marks that the experience had left. "I don't know," I replied, the sincerity of my words cutting through the superficiality of bravado. "I feel like, in some way, this battle has changed me. I won't be able to forget what I saw, the souls, the spirit. It's as if a part of me was torn away and left behind in that place." She nodded, the sadness in her eyes mirroring mine. "I think we'll never be the same. What we lived through is not something that fades away. But that doesn't mean we can't move forward. The truth may be painful, but it is also liberating." As we walked, searching for a way out of that enigmatic space, I noticed that the reality around us began to dissolve into a faint fog. The walls seemed to float, and the ground beneath our feet became unstable, as if the very structure of our experience was disintegrating. Whatever we had faced, there was no doubt that the battle would leave indelible marks on us. "Do you think the spirit was really appeased?" I asked, an unease growing inside me. "What if it comes back? What if the evil we faced is still lurking? Clara gave me an intense look. I don't know, but I know that, regardless of what happens, we have to remember what we learned. Whatever happened, there was not in vain. Her words were a balm, but the uncertainty still weighed heavily on me. When we finally found an exit, the fresh air hit us like a punch in the stomach. The sunlight illuminated the outside world, but there was something different about everything. The colors seemed more vibrant and, at the same time, more oppressive. The sky was a deep blue, but there were clouds in sight, clouds that seemed to promise storms. "Let's go home," Clara said, her voice now firmer. I followed her, but with each step, I realized that the home I once knew was no longer the same. The walls, the furniture, even the photos on the wall seemed to have changed. The sense of security I once felt had faded, leaving a void in its place. In the weeks that followed, the emotional scars began to manifest in unexpected ways. I had frequent nightmares, reliving the battle against the spirit, feeling the pressure of the shadows again. Each time I woke up, the feeling of suffocation accompanied me, and I found myself trapped in an endless cycle of fear and insecurity. Clara was struggling too. The laughter that used to light up her face was now rare, and the conversations that once flowed naturally were filled with heavy silences. What had brought us together had become a burden, a constant reminder of what we had been through. The spirit that once terrorized our lives had now become an echo in our minds, a reminder that evil can hide beneath the surface, ready to resurge. One day, while walking alone through the streets of the city, I noticed that the world around me seemed darker. The shadows stretched ominously, and the people passing by seemed enveloped in a fog of sadness. It was as if the city was reflecting our suffering, and I couldn't shake the thought that the spirit might never have been fully expelled. I then decided to visit the place where it all began, the spot that now bore the mark of our struggle. When I arrived, the atmosphere felt different. There was a reverent silence, as if the very space was waiting for closure. I looked around, remembering the souls we had freed and the price we paid for it. "Clara?" I murmured to myself. Did our struggle make a difference? Did we really manage to change anything? The answer was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. We could never forget what we lived through, and the scars we carried would become part of our story, a testament to the battle against the darkness. As the sun set, casting a golden light over the place, I realized that although the fight was over, the journey was far from finished. Whatever the future held, I knew I would have to face it, not just the shadows of the past, but also the uncertainties of the present and the hopes for the future. It was a path I could not walk alone. The truth, though painful, had become my constant companion, and I was determined to embrace it, no matter what that meant. After all, what are we if not the echoes of our experiences? And as Clara and I continued together, there would always be a light to guide us, even in the darkest hours. The light slowly faded on the horizon, and I found myself on the edge of an emotional abyss, looking at what was left of me after the storm I had gone through. The memories of the battle against the spirit still danced in my mind, a whirlwind of images that intertwined with pain and determination. The echo of the souls we freed was intertwined with the haunting shadow of what we could have lost. I wondered if the struggle had really made a difference. There was a weight on my shoulders, a burden that had become part of my being. The experience had transformed me in ways I still did not fully understand. Before, I was someone who believed that life was a sequence of predictable events, a path traced with certainty. But now, everything seemed a tangle of uncertainties. The emotional scars were deep, and the fragility of life had become a constant, a reminder that evil could lie in wait, even in the most unexpected places. Reflecting on Clara, I realized that our connection had intensified, but it had also become a thin line between solidarity and shared pain. What once seemed so natural had become a minefield of emotions, where each word could trigger painful memories. I wished we could go back to what we were before, but I knew that was impossible. The past had shaped us, and the experiences we lived had become part of us, like scars that, though invisible, would never fade away. As I walked through those streets that now seemed darker, I realized that the world around me reflected our suffering. The gaze of the people, the way they avoided eye contact, everything felt loaded with a shared sadness. I felt like an intruder in a place that was once familiar. What would happen if the spirit returned? What if the battle we faced had not really ended? These questions echoed in my mind, creating a symphony of uncertainties that would not let me be at peace. The place where it all began felt like a sanctuary of memories. As I approached, a wave of emotions flooded my being. The reverent silence of the surroundings seemed to envelop me, and I knew that this place carried not only the marks of the struggle, but also the hope for closure. The sun, which was slowly setting, cast a golden glow over everything, as if inviting me to reflect on what truly mattered. In moments like this, I realized that the true battle was not just against the spirit, but against the shadow it had left in us. The internal struggle against fear, insecurity, and doubt was a war that would continue to be fought, even outside that space. The truth that had emerged from the darkness was, paradoxically, a light, a revelation that life, with all its complexities, is a precious gift. I could not allow fear to dictate my actions, nor could I let the past define my future. I understood that even though the journey was filled with uncertainties, there was a path to follow. Clara and I had faced the darkness together, and that connection had become a beacon amidst the storm. The scars we carried made us stronger, more resilient. We were not just survivors, we were witnesses to our own strength. As the sun bid farewell, feeling the gentle breeze on my face, I realized I was not alone. The struggle might have changed everything, but hope still pulsed within me. It was this hope that would guide me, reminding me that light can always emerge from shadows, even if faintly. Whatever the future held, I would face it with courage and determination, knowing that each step would be a testament to the journey I carry within me. And so, I left the place no longer as someone marked only by pain, but as someone who embraced the complexity of life. The questions still echoed in my mind, but now they were accompanied by a sense of acceptance. The journey was not a destination to be reached, but a path to be traveled, and I was ready to move forward, even if it meant facing new storms. After all, the light that guides us can come from the wounds we carry, and I was determined to let that light illuminate not only my path, but also Clara's. As we continued to write our story together, the shadows of the night began to stretch, and I knew that the moment to confront my fears was approaching. As I walked, a chill ran down my spine, as if the very air around me was charged with omens. Clara had drifted a bit away, lost in her own thoughts, but I felt the connection between us, even in the distance. Something was about to happen, and the weight of uncertainty was felt in every beat of my heart. I arrived at the place where we first faced the spirit. The ground still seemed to vibrate with the energy of that battle, a vivid reminder of horrors lived and triumphs achieved. However, the tranquility I expected to find was far from materializing. Instead, a palpable tension hung in the air, as if the universe was holding its breath in anticipation. I felt that something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I looked at Clara and saw the same unease reflected on her face. "Do you feel that?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. She nodded, her eyes wide. Before we could process the situation, a strong wind blew, making the leaves of the trees dance frantically. The atmosphere shifted, and a familiar yet terrifying presence began to manifest. The spirit, or what was left of it, was back. The moonlight illuminated its outline, revealing an indistinct and threatening shape. The The terror I thought I had left behind returned with full force, and I knew that the battle was not over. The echoes of our past voices mingled with those shadows, and I realized that our struggle was not only against a supernatural being, but against the consequences of its actions. The spirit fed on fear, and the more we allowed ourselves to be consumed by it, the stronger it would become. We can't let it win again, I declared, determination growing within me. But the tension did not dissipate. The shadows around us began to stir, as if they were alive, dancing to a grim rhythm. Clara and I positioned ourselves side by side, and the sense of unity gave us some hope. But a bitter doubt lingered in my mind. What if we couldn't? What if all we had done so far didn't matter? The spirit began to approach, its distorted form seeming to mold with each step. I could feel despair creeping into my mind, trying to convince me that defeat was imminent. But at that moment, a shining idea arose. What if instead of fighting, we tried to understand? The spirit was a reflection of our own pains, and perhaps the way to victory lay in empathy. Clara, we have to try to talk, I shouted, but her voice got lost in the wind. The spirit lunged toward us, and instinctively, I braced myself for impact. But instead, a wave of energy enveloped the area, and I realized that Clara had stepped forward, trying to create a barrier between us and the spirit, using the strength of our connection. The impact was overwhelming. The shadows became a whirlwind of emotions, and I felt her pain mingling with mine. It was as if we were sharing not just our fears, but also our hopes and dreams. The spirit hesitated, confused by the intensity of our bond, but doubt still lingered in my mind. Would this be enough to defeat it? Then, a scream cut through the silence, an echo that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. A deep chill enveloped me, and I realized that the spirit was growing stronger, feeding off our fear and uncertainties. I knew we needed to act quickly, but what would be the right action? At the height of the tension, the moonlight shone brightly, illuminating the space around us. In a moment of clarity, I realized that the answer lay not just in fighting, but in acceptance. We are here, I declared, my voice firm. We are alive, and we are not afraid of you. For a moment, the spirit's presence seemed to waver, but in the blink of an eye, the darkness intensified. The screams became a deafening chorus, and the spirit lunged at us with terrifying force. The world around us began to spin, and everything I knew was about to be consumed by the shadows. The last memory I had was of Clara's face, her determination reflected in her eyes, before the darkness completely engulfed us. And as if time had stopped, the question echoing in my mind was, what did it really mean to win? The struggle seemed far from over, and I knew that even if we survived, the terror would leave deep marks on our lives. And so, enveloped in darkness, I realized that the true battle was just beginning, and that the shadows would never be fully banished. The answers I sought would remain hidden, and the future became an agonizing mystery as the moonlight slowly faded away. If you have ever faced your own shadows, share your story in the comments. Let's explore together what it truly means to fight against fear. Every interaction helps bring more content like this to all of us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because the journey is far from over.